Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Prime Time with Sean Mooney. Welcome once again as we have another great episode coming your way. Coming off a really interesting episode with Eli Drake. I really love Eli, and I've gotten to know him a little bit at the NWA tapings and also doing the podcast with him. Found out about a pretty incredible journey he's taken. He's worked for so many different organizations, had some things that knocked him down. He was with the WWE. Thought he was going to have a big opportunity there. It didn't work out, but you know what? He's bounced back, man. That guy just kept going and has had great success in the world of professional wrestling, and also is now finding a new beginning, really, with NWA, and he's become one of their stars. Let me talk to you has really become a rallying cry for the crowds there. I mean, they really just get pumped up whenever he shows up in the arena there. And he is just fantastic, and I really want to thank Eli for coming on. We'll have him back as we will have other NWA stars here on Primetime, but also we have other guests as well, and that is the case today. We've had WWE referee here before. You remember we had Earl Hebner on, and he had a lot of great stories to tell. What a career that he had with the WWF, WWE. Well, this week we're going to welcome Charles Robinson, who is a famed referee with the WWE, but he's got quite a history with the WCW, had some good runs there, not only as the third man in the ring, but also stepped into the ring and wrestled, which we'll be talking about, as Little Naitch. And folks, what's great about this episode is we're doing something a little bit different because Charles and I went on for a long time. We had a really long conversation, and we put it out there to let people throw some questions out there for him, and I'm telling you, it's one of the greatest responses we've ever had. We must have had, I think, over 50 questions from people coming in. So we kind of whittled, some of them were the same questions, we whittled them down, and we did a whole Q&A session. So what we're going to do is we're going to break this up in two parts. We're releasing the first part of the episode today, this Wednesday officially, as we drop it. I know our Patreon members got it early. But we're going to drop the other part of it, the Q&A, where he actually gives us a tour of his George Michael shrine. I was going to say museum, but really it's like a shrine. But just some really great stuff, as we also have in this episode. But we have the video version as well because we did the interview on Skype and we used the video version of it too. So there's a lot of ways you can catch this episode, and it's all coming up. So you can get it, the first part today, the other part on Friday. Patreon members will get both episodes early because we love you so much and you're so loyal. So that'll be coming your way. We'll get to my conversation, the first part with Charles coming up. But also I want to remind everybody that I'd love to have you email me. You can do that by emailing me at primetimemooney@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at primetimemooney. But right now, what do you say? Let's get to my conversation, part one, with Charles Robinson. Ding, ding, ding. Well, folks, the idea of the third man in the ring is that he's supposed to stay out of the way, govern the match with authority. And my guest is very good at doing that, except trouble seems to always find him. And
that sounds
trouble,
about right.
Yeah, and trouble wasn't often kind. It hasn't been kind all along the way. But I say that in jest, and I'm really happy to have legendary referee Charles Robinson. And I won't just say WWE because he also was very well known when the WCW was in its glory days. But Charles Robinson, or Little Naitch, as many people know you, welcome to Primetime with Sean Mooney. How are you?
Sean, I'm doing great, and thanks so much for having me on your podcast.
You know, I have, doing my research for this conversation, and also knowing some of the big events that you've been involved in over the years. And it always strikes me as interesting as, how people get into the business. And a lot of times people, they want to be a wrestler. That's, and they end up, as a referee because they didn't have that opportunity or whatever. But early on, were you attracted to saying, I think it'd be pretty cool to be a ref? Because I know that you emulated Tommy Young. So was this something that came on early, or did you want to be a wrestler?
Of course, I mean, growing up, I grew up in the Mid-Atlantic area, Jim Crockett Promotions. Fell in love with Ric Flair. That was my first love of wrestling.
Yes.
With that. So I think as a kid, I always wanted to be a wrestler.
Mhm.
I just never had the size.
Yeah.
And life moved on. And then when I started getting close to 30, I ran into a group here in Charlotte. It was called the PWF, Professional Wrestling Federation. And it was run by George South and the Italian Stallion.
Mm.
And I actually started out doing photos for them. And just by chance, one night they wanted to do an angle where I got attacked. And then the next week I would come back as a special guest referee. And once I came back, they said, "Charles, you're pretty natural at this." And I guess compared to who they had, I might have been, but you know, but I had
Wasn't
watched
deep in talent, huh?
not real deep in
Referee
talent.
wise. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct. And I watched Tommy Young for years and years, and I just love the way that he refereed, and I think he added a lot to the match. I don't think he took anything away from it, and that's what I tried to do when I was in the ring early on.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that love for Southern wrestling, because it's a whole different style that people, especially living in that part of the country, just fell in love with growing up, and it's certainly been rich, over the years. But you mentioned, Ric Flair is a guy that you immediately were attracted to. I think for the first match you ever saw was him and Wahoo McDaniel. So
Right.
tell me about that love early on in Southern wrestling and how it's different.
Just growing up, I always thought that the NWA and Mid Atlantic was so realistic.
Yeah.
I believed everything that I saw. Even as I got older, the way that it was presented made me believe what I was watching was real, not predetermined.
Mm-hmm.
And I turned on the WWF at the time, and I would see things like Doink the Clown and things like that, which they were great performers, but they were more characters.
Yeah.
And Ric Flair was just the nature boy. He wasn't a clown. And Ricky Steamboat, Blackjack Mulligan, these guys, they were just all very, very tough guys, very, very talented performers.
And that's a really good point you make about that style and it's something that would serve the WCW tremendously well in the 90s when we had the Monday Night Wars was, blurring that line. And as you said, the WWF in the early 80s when the wave was really just starting to crush there, it was, there were very strong characters and, a lot of it was promo based and that kind of thing. But that style of wrestling, though, was you like tough guys, brawlers.
Yes.
And a lot of people who are, I guess like the purists, really love that style of wrestling.
Absolutely. And I loved it as well. And there were times that I enjoyed watching WWF. Please don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
There's always something for everyone everywhere. But I just gravitated more towards Jim Crockett because it was here in my backyard. Every week we'd go to the Coliseum to see it or to the Park Center to see Mid-Atlantic Wrestling.
Yeah, and God, you said you were 30 before you really got involved in this business. That's pretty amazing. How did that happen?
Just right place at the right time because I was in the Navy from high school till I was 24, and then I got into sales when I got out of the Navy. Something that I did not enjoy, but it was a living. And after I went through a divorce, I saw George South and the Italian Stallion on TV one time, and saw they were doing a show nearby, and I just went to the show and I fell in love with their show. They had such a great talent base there, and I told them I wanted to take photos for them, and for some reason they said yes. So without George South and the Italian Stallion, there would be no career for me.
So did you know how to take pictures? I mean, were you a decent photographer, or you just said this is a good way to get inside and get close to the wrestlers? And
Oh, did I lie to him?
like Jim Crockett, I was going to say. Not Jim
No.
Crockett, but Barnett. What am I thinking of? God dang it.
Was it Barnett? I know. I think
No,
I know
no,
who
no,
you're
no.
talking about. I can't even remember either. I mean, there's
Yeah.
Jim Cornette. I
Jim
think he did.
Cornette. Oh, God,
Yes,
bless
yes,
America.
yes. That's
All
it.
right, so we're going to back that up. So, did you think along the
That's
way
okay.
here that that was your way to get in, like Corny? I mean, he was a legit photographer when he started out.
Well, in the Navy, I was on a submarine. With such a small crew, you have a lot of
Yeah.
different jobs that you have to do.
Yeah.
And one of my jobs was the ship's photographer. So I had an eye and the ability to be a photographer. And I went to them and told them that I was a photographer, and we actually had several photos that were published in the Inside Wrestling, the Wrestler magazines.
Well, so how did you make this transition though? I mean, you said it was kind of like this opportunity. They said, "Hey, we got an idea," but were you doing some reffing in the meantime? Were you getting into the ring and getting some training, or or is it just one of those things that we just throw you in there and we've got this idea with the camera and you're going to have this flash bulb go off in this guy's eyes and we're going to take it from there?
And that's exactly what they did. The guy
Yeah.
came out, threw me in the post, busted me open, very first time in wrestling, and I'm bleeding all over the place. Isn't that crazy?
That seemed to happen a lot to you
Yes, it did.
along the
Absolutely.
way. Yeah.
And, they just threw me in there. They told me to cut a little promo about coming back the next week. And I did. And I showed up the next week and they gave me a referee shirt and threw me in the ring.
So did you have an aptitude for it at that point, or you just start picking it up, or how did that start to happen where this started to become a regular thing for you?
I had a very good idea just from watching Tommy all those years and watching all the other referees in WCW, the Nick Patricks, the Randy Andersons, people like that. You can learn so much just by observing and just watching a lot of videotapes. And it's just something that you learn as you go. I mean, the first time I wasn't great. I don't think anyone is. But as time goes on, you learn where not to be, where to be, what to do, and what not to do. And I was very, very fortunate that Stallion and George South, they were patient with me to do that.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of one of those things. What do they say? Stay out of the way and don't step in front of the hard camera. Is that kind of the first couple of things they tell you?
Well, they didn't say that because they didn't have a camera. They didn't actually have a TV show.
No.
So you could move around. I actually, once I had been reffing for them for maybe 6 months, I had a video camera and a monitor that I carried for one of my jobs. So I actually brought that, and that was the first time that we started taping the PWF shows.
Yeah.
That way I could actually watch back what I was doing as well.
So fast forward here as we move
Sure.
along here with how it actually started to become serious for you. And I know then that you had this dream. I guess you thought you didn't want to go back to sales, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
But you wanted to go big time. And you talk about persistence. What was your plan? At some point you said, I think I can do this at a elite level. And what did you do?
I actually contacted Terry Taylor, who was talent relations with WCW, and I bothered him for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks on end. I would send videotapes. I would call his office. I would write letters. Just asked him for a shot. And eventually, they were in Charlotte, North Carolina at the old Coliseum, the Independence Arena, and I just showed up. And I confronted Terry. And he asked me if I had my bag with me, if I had my gear. And I said, well, Terry, I think we're always supposed to carry our bag, right?
First rule,
And
yeah.
First rule. And he goes, we'll take a look at you tonight and see what we can do for you.
And it worked out.
It did work out.
Yeah, who was that first match? Do you remember?
It was Chris Adams and Kendall Windham, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. It was a dark match for Nitro.
And afterwards, they said, "Hey, you think you got something?" Or how did it progress from there?
Well, Jody Hamilton, he was the person that would talk to me next, and that's what he said. He goes, "Just wait, kid. We'll get to you." And I waited for a week or two, and I got a call to be in Orlando in October for the Universal TV tapings.
Yeah.
And that's where I started out.
Yeah, and you came in at a pretty damn good time. This was a point right where they were still riding high
They
in the
were.
WCW. So fitting into that world, it must have been pretty crazy because I mean, boy, that was what, 97, and
It was.
things were going really well.
It was. It was going great, and and just being a huge wrestling fan, and I watched wrestling every week. Anytime it was on TV, I watched it. So I was starstruck first time I showed up at the arena, Universal Studios, to be a part of it. And one of the things that it's bittersweet. They brought me in just for a trial basis, but then Brian Hildebrand, also known as Mark Curtis, that's when he started getting sick with cancer, and they needed someone to take his spot until he was well enough to come back.
So how long did it take you to settle in to where you got over that? I can't believe I'm here and doing these matches with people like Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan and all these other guys that they had on that roster.
Years.
Never really.
Took years.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in the ring with a Ric Flair or a Hogan or someone like that, I felt very honored just to be there, and you would get the butterflies because you're with the best of the best when you're with them.
So, did you tell me a little bit about that period of time that, like when you did come in, what it was like just to be in that atmosphere where, they're beating the WWE every week.
That was very, very exciting, and we were watching the WWE to see what they were doing.
Yeah.
It was an exciting time. That was the best time for pro wrestling, in my opinion, is when you have competition.
Oh yeah.
It makes you strive a little bit harder, not become complacent with where you are. So I was excited to be part of that.
And now I know that you had, I don't know how your relationship developed with Rick. I know you talk about that you met him early, I guess when you were even as a kid. But how did that relationship start and then grow?
Well, I started out, just going to the matches. Finally, I think the first time I met Rick was probably in the late 70s at a ballpark in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. He was having a match against Wahoo McDaniels. And during the intermission, I went down there just to say hi. He goes, "Kid, go buy me a Coke." So he gave me a dollar bill. I went and got his Coke for 50 cents and went back down. That's the first time that I actually met him and got a photo and got the autograph, which unfortunately I don't have anymore. You lose those things.
Yeah.
But then as time went on, I wanted to start up a Ric Flair fan club. So I don't recommend doing this, but I found out where he lived and I went to his house.
Oh, boy.
And I remember getting out of the car, and Ashley was, maybe 5 or 6 years old. And I come up and she goes, "I'm Ashley Flair. What are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm here to see your dad about." Yeah, that's what I was basically. But I really wanted to start up a fan club. I thought it would be something great to do. I didn't know about all the corporate things going on with WCW and such that you had to, you just can't do that stuff. They own all the rights to that. But Rick was very, very nice, and
he didn't have you arrested.
He did not have me arrested. He actually showed me the gym in his garage, which was awesome.
Wow.
And for someone just to show up on your doorstep like that,
yeah,
it was pretty amazing.
That is. So, did you remind him of that later? Did he remember what?
He did remember that because not very many people would come to his house.
Have the guts. Yeah.
Yes.
So once you were there, though, how did it really this relationship go until to the point where you're Little Naitch?
Well, I did not see Rick much until I actually got into WCW in '97, and the whole thing with Little Naitch was actually Kevin Nash's idea. I guess he was doing the booking then, And Kevin Nash came up to me one day and said, "Hey, how would you like to have a mini Naitch robe and get to wrestle on a pay-per-view?" I said, "That sounds great." He goes,
Yeah.
"Now you have to lose to a woman." I said, "I don't care.
Care who I lose to or
It
what.
doesn't matter." And then he explained the whole concept of what the angle would be.
Yeah.
And, I was just flabbergasted that they would ask me to do it. But being as big of a fan, everybody knew that I was a huge Ric Flair fan
Right.
from the time that I was there. So I was happy as could be.
Yeah, I imagine that just given that opportunity, but were you a little concerned because you were going to have to go in there and take some bumps and look somewhat like you knew what you're doing? Had you done any training really before that, and how much did you do to prepare for those matches?
Leading up to the match that I had at Slamboree,
Yeah.
we spent maybe a week in Tampa with Randy Savage, and he took Gorgeous George and myself, and we worked out in a unair conditioned 110-degree warehouse for a week.
Oh, boy.
And we went through everything that he wanted done. This was his baby, and he was very, very patient. And considering neither one of us had any in-ring experience wrestling, I thought the match came out pretty good.
Yeah. No, you handled yourself pretty well. I mean, you look at it, some of the stuff you did in there, and then of course that match with Medusa, where you ended up with Randy dropping the elbow. You look at that video, and I looked at it again today. Did you know right away, like, oh my God? I mean, everything's gone. Tell me about the closing minutes of that match.
Yeah, we had the whole thing synchronized pretty well with Rick doing a flip, me doing a flip, slam, clothesline, clothesline. Flair's out of the ring. No reason for Rick to take the fall if I'm in the ring. So I'm going to be the one that's going to be taking the elbow from Randy.
Yeah.
The problem was nobody told me how to brace for the elbow, so I just laid there and gave my whole body. Randy, unfortunately, was probably
Nobody
around.
told you? Randy didn't say
Nobody.
this is how you're going to take
No,
this?
absolutely not. So I just lay there and didn't cinch up, didn't breathe out, probably held my breath. And at 285, when a guy that size lands on you,
Yeah.
something has to give. And of course, at first I thought my air was knocked out.
Yeah.
No big deal. I just rolled out of the ring, tried to catch my breath, got dressed, went up to my hotel room that was attached to the arena. And about 2 hours later, I still couldn't breathe. So I called Jimmy Hart and told him, and he called the EMTs, and they took me to the hospital and says, "Son, you have a collapsed lung, and you have a cracked sternum,
Oh,
and some of your vertebrae are a little cracked. So
we're going to keep you.
We're going to keep you."
Huh.
The next day, the doctors actually released me and let me fly home to Charlotte.
Really?
With a collapsed lung, which is nuts. I'm glad they did, for the simple fact I'd rather be in the hospital at home versus halfway across the United States. But I went to the hospital as soon as I got home, and they admitted me, and I was there for 2 weeks.
Wow. And
Yeah.
and knowing Randy and the professional that he was, I imagine he felt awful about it. Uh, what did he tell you after that match? And did he, keep in touch through
He
it?
did.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Randy called almost every day. So much so it could be a nuisance because I'm trying to rest.
Yeah.
But he was awesome, man. He called me, and he'd go, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna get you some money," So so he got me a nice payday for everything, which was very, very nice of him.
Wow.
But
Well, you say that was the end of your wrestling career, but I've seen some of the shots that you took along the way as a ref, and it doesn't sound to me like that really ended your wrestling career. Tell me about some of the other things that happened to you along the way that have happened in the ring as a referee who supposedly is the guy who is just there to make sure the match goes well. But that's not always the case. And so physically, what kind of damage have you taken over the years?
When I was still with the PWF, I had my elbow kicked out of the socket by a wrestler by the name of Firebreaker Chip. Unfortunately, I didn't have the nerve to stay in the ring. I saw my bone sticking outside the elbow, and I rolled out of the ring and walked to the back. I hear of a lot of people that get injured and they stay in, they finish the match, but I'd only been working on the independents for maybe a year when that happened. So it sort of freaked me out that my elbow was not where it was supposed to be.
I could see that. And probably you were making a lot of money for that match, which was worth sticking around, right? How much?
Yeah, I think I got a hot dog and a soda. They wanted to charge me extra for the chili and the onion, so I didn't go with those. But yeah, you're right. You don't make any money. You're on your own dime for injuries with your insurance. So, that was actually probably the worst because I was in a sling, one of those mechanical extenders, I guess, for your arm. Have you ever seen those, Sean?
Yeah.
I was in one of those for about 3 months.
Oh, nice.
That was fun. But those are the only times that I've been injured. Now I've had some big
no
falls.
concussions, or I mean, some of the stuff, man. I see you take.
You know what? I've been hit with chairs. I'm sure I got concussed on those. I do remember my first Nitro. It was in Tampa, Florida, and the NWO came out, and they sent all the referees out, and Scott Hall came up to me. We were outside the ring, and he punched me, so I took a bump like I was used to taking, of course, not thinking that there was no padding, and I hit my head on the concrete, and I saw stars. So I'm sure that I was concussed in that instance.
Yeah. What's interesting is that, having a conversation with Earl Hebner, and I'd never really thought about it before, but as a referee, you have to take the bump differently than a wrestler because it's got to be, it's a total shock. First of all, you're not expecting to get hit, and you have to fall like naturally, like you would if you were just somebody, who was getting ran into. And it's a different way that you react, right?
Yeah. In some ways I feel that way, but also if you do it differently than how the wrestlers are bumping, that means that what they are doing is not real.
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think, to me personally, my opinion is you should sort of bump like the wrestlers. That way it all looks the same. Because why would you want to say that the way that everyone else is taking a bump is predetermined, but yours isn't?
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
but
I think it's the way he explained it is that, like, for example, you getting caught between two guys. It's a whole different form of combat, I guess, or you're getting, you're caught in this violence, and you would naturally react differently. Your body would than they would, because they're locked in, like, say they, as they're squared off, that it would be a different way to take the bump. And it's true that, they have to make it look, I guess, in a sense that you don't expect it at all. I don't know. I guess that's the best way I can explain it, but it is,
I understand
it's a different art is the way that I look at it.
Right. And I agree with that too, and coming from Earl saying that, he's definitely one of the best ever in the business. So, I certainly respect what he has to say. He's been doing it long enough.
And mentioning that, the Hebners, did you, I don't know if you looked up to them, or were they referees because kind of before your time, before you really arrived on the scene, and they were pretty ensconced in the WWF, WWE. Were they two guys that you kind of looked up to, or is it your
yes, absolutely, Sean. They were involved in some of the best angles that the WWE did, and certainly in their prime, they were two amazing referees. There's someone that I can learn a lot from, and even now, you go back and watch stuff that they've done. You can learn from them.
Yeah.
And they
And
have great knowledge.
yeah, and obviously you were really well thought of, and I think that the compliment to a referee is when you have some of the best, the elite wrestlers in the business want you in the ring there with them. And during that period of time when you were there, when it was really just a great time to be with the WCW, what are some of the matches with them that really stand out? I know there were others later with the WWE with Sean and Rick, but during that time with the WCW, what matches really stand out to you?
Probably the biggest was Hogan Goldberg at the Georgia Dome
Mm-hmm.
when Goldberg won his first title. That's definitely probably the biggest one to be part of, in my opinion. I did a lot of Flair Hogan matches,
Yeah.
too, of course. Some that were silly. I think we had a first blood match, and then there was a pinfall in the match, which made no
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 sense.
sense whatsoever. But I was very, very lucky to work with a lot of those guys.
And even during that time, even though the ratings certainly didn't reflect it, was there a lot of times when you kind of look like, what are they thinking here with the way we're going with some of these storylines?
Um, I think that happens all the time in this profession anyway.
Yeah.
But it comes a point where it's not for us to question; it's for us to do
Go out and work.
and go out and work. And but now today, if someone does something that if they bring it up before the match and it doesn't make sense, if I bring it up, a lot of times they'll change it. They'll say, "Hey, we didn't even think about that."
Yeah.
Sometimes they forget how it's going to affect the referee and the legitimacy of what's going on, if
Hmm.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
When you started to, at one point, did it get to the situation where you started to really see things start to turn with the WCW? Well, what do you think was the beginning of the end there?
wow, I don't know exactly when it started. I mean, just because my memory's not as good as I would like.
Yeah.
But you could tell the last year when they were talking about Time Warner and AOL and that merger, um, things just didn't feel happy within the locker room.
Uh-huh.
You know, um, I didn't hang out with the guys a lot. I ran around with Rick some and Arn Anderson and our trainer who was Danny Young. Um, that's really who I hung out with. I didn't listen to what was going on in the locker room a lot and what was going on. Like when Vince Russo came in, people say, "How was Vince?" I never talked to Vince Russo. How was Eric? I
Yeah.
I never talked to Eric Bischoff.
Really?
Yeah,
You
I
just
remember
did.
one.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I remember one time when I first got there, I was so enamored. Eric Bischoff's a big deal. So I was excited to be there. And he actually told Terry Taylor one time, he goes, "Would you please tell that little blonde headed referee to quit staring at me? It's creeping me out." So that's something that's pretty funny. And I asked Eric about it not too long ago. He goes, "I don't remember saying that, but I probably
Probably
did."
did. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. That's very funny. But when it started to go south, and you mentioned hanging out with Rick at the time,
Yep.
that must have just been crazy. I don't know how many stories you've revealed over the time, but I've heard quite a few of people who were actually close to him. What was that like?
Rick, he would go wide open all the time.
Yeah.
When he was in the ring, 100% professional, the best in the business, in my opinion. But when he was done with work, it was time to play. And,
Uh,
and when he did it, he wanted to do it first class. There was no going second rate with him. If we were going to drive town to town, he was going to be in a nice car. The hotel that we stayed at, it was going to be in a nice hotel, and it had better have a bar.
yeah.
So, he just wanted to relax and have a great time.
Why do you think you two got along so well?
I don't know. Um, maybe he just wanted to help out a young kid from where he lived. I have no idea. The person that really took me under their wing was Arn Anderson, though.
Really?
You know, from the first time I got there, he just took me in. He would let me ride with him. I don't know how many times he let me stay in his room just so I could save on a hotel room. He was the person that took care of me the most. Him and the trainer, Danny Young.
Wow, that's great.
A lot of people don't know that. They think Rick did everything for me, but it was actually Arn and Danny that really, really took care of me.
Well, it's kind of a natural thing because of the fact that you were involved in these storylines with them. But that's very cool. I never heard that before, that you were close to Arn as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
At what point did you decide maybe it was time to get out of there?
To get out of
the WCW?
When the WWE bought us.
Yeah.
I was there at the last.
I thought you left
Nitro.
earlier. I thought you left
no,
earlier. No.
I actually did the Flair Sting match, the last match on Nitro. I did that match. And I went home for 2 months, 2.5 months, and dug ditches and built decks. Did a lot of manual labor, which I don't mind doing. And they called me up the last week of June, they being WWE, and they said, we decided we're going to bring you on board and to be in Tacoma, Washington on July the 2nd. So July the 2nd, 2001 is when I started my tenure with WWE.
So were you as persistent with them as you were with Terry Taylor?
No, because they said, we'll call you when we're ready.
Don't call us, we'll call you.
Yes. And so I was just planning on a life outside of wrestling. And fortunately, they called me up. And it was a great birthday present. July the 2nd was my birthday, so it was a great way to spend my birthday.
Now, people know what wrestlers ended up going to the WWE, but did they take a lot of the people, like there were referees and behind the scenes folks?
Right. They took a few of the referees. I think Mickey Henson they took Nick Patrick, and they took Billy Silverman and myself. So the 4 referees, that's who they had. And we came in to do the WCW invasion angle, of course.
Right. Was it sad to you to see the way it ended? With after it riding so high, and then it happened fast when you look at it relatively.
It really was. And even up until we knew something was going on, we actually thought that Eric Bischoff was going to buy the company.
Yeah.
And up until I know it was Jerry Briscoe showed up, Shane McMahon showed up, a couple other guys. I mean, at that point when they walked in, we knew
it's over.
The riding, it was over. So it was a shock. A lot of tears that night. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, what was it like, though, to go to the WWE and initially try and fit in there? How were you guys received up there?
Of course, I think anytime someone from the outside comes in, people are leery of you coming in because you're trying to take their spot. But
even for referees, was it like that for you guys too?
Well, probably more so because there's even less spots for referees. Yeah. But I think we had Jack Doan, Chad Patton. Those were 2 guys that I really clicked with. I remember one story. They were sitting there playing cards or something, and something happened where I threw water on one of them for some reason. I can't even remember why. And
a rib?
So they took me and they actually taped me to a chair, taped my mouth shut, taped my arms down, taped my legs down. Then they put a sign on me that said, "The Rock who?" And they pushed me up for my first meeting with Dwayne Johnson.
Okay.
And and my finger was taped with the bird.
Oh,
so
nice.
I was giving The Rock the bird, asking him who he was. And that's how they got me back for throwing some water on him.
And how did that go over with Dwayne?
Oh, he laughed. He laughed. He goes, "Well, who are you?" It doesn't matter who you are, But for some reason, we all just got along really, really well. And I'm sure that they were skeptical. Earl was there as well. And he was very, very nice. And he
Mhm.
took care of me as well. He just told me how things work there. Keep your mouth shut, do what you're told, and you'll be
Yeah.
here as long as you want to be here.
And how was that? Fitting in from a company that was the way it was run with WCW to a very corporate run operation, basically at that point with the WWE.
It was definitely a change.
Yeah.
I was on my toes a little bit more. I'd become a little bit relaxed in WCW near the end. So it was a whole new environment. But I had people that were looking out for me for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Earl definitely did, um, and all the other referees. No one was worried about losing their spot. I think it was because of the way they did the invasion angle, because we were two separate crews.
Hmm.
Ryan Hebner was part of the WCW invasion angle as well with us. I think it
Right.
was Nick, Billy Silverman, Brian, myself. Um, I remember us four, and I think Mickey Henson was still there, but I'm not sure. I cannot remember that.
Yeah. Man, and it's just amazing to think that now, you've been there that long. Uh, why do you think you've been able to last as long as you have there?
I don't know. I like to think it's because of my great hair, but I don't, Sean, seriously, I don't know, man. Every time that I get to go to work, I'm just grateful.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit older than the other guys. I'm probably the oldest referee there. Um, Mike Chioda, of course, he's there, but he's not as old as I am.
Yeah, I
And
know. He was a young
I'm just,
kid when I was
I,
there.
my gracious.
Yeah.
And I work hard. I do ring crew work as well. Set up, tear down the ring, and um, I think I do a pretty decent job. I'm not. I know I'm not the best, but I'm definitely people identify with me,
Hmm.
of course. So maybe that helps. But I'm very, very loyal employee, and you know, hey, I love the WWE.
Yeah.
They've been nothing but good to me.
Yeah. And it's as you mentioned, it's such a glamorous life as as a referee,
Oh
where
yeah,
you're still setting up the ring. I mean, people, you have to understand that you got to wear a lot of hats, even in this day and age with the WWE. That it's not just you going in for these matches; that you're also involved behind the scenes. You say set up the ring, but I know it's more involved than that. So. Uh, Tell me a little bit more about what your behind the scene work is about.
well, the television versus the live events, the non-televised products, a little bit different.
Hmm.
For non-televised shows, we may go in at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning to start the day, and that's where we'll mark the floor so we know where to put the ring. Then we'll build the ring. We'll do the padding. We'll do the railings around. Um, if any of the other departments need help, we can help them with lighting and stage. Um, I don't mess with the audio video because I know nothing about those things, but I can help with the stage or with lighting a little bit.
Yeah.
TV days you get to go in a little bit later, but you're still there early in the morning. And once the show's over, Sean, someone has to take it down, and so we're always the last one to leave.
Yeah, that's amazing. How have you seen this company grow from the time you came in there to what it is now? Because all you have to do is maybe go behind the arena just to see just the trucks that are
Right.
involved. But how have you seen it evolve over the years from the time you arrived to what it is now?
Well, I remember on the live events we used to come out and it would be a black curtain,
Yeah,
no lights. There'd
yeah,
be
yeah,
whatever lights the arena had. That's what we would use a lot of times. Um, it has grown crazy.
yeah.
It used to be a 45-minute setup, and now it's a 4 or 5 hour setup. Same with teardown and with social media being involved so much. I mean, it has changed so much. But I personally think it's for the good.
Yeah.
You know, everybody says old school, old school. Well, everything evolves.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure the people that watched wrestling in the 50s and 60s thought the stuff that was happening in the 70s and 80s was garbage,
Mhm.
you know, and boring. Well, now people that are watching, now, and they look at the stuff from the 80s, they're like, what is that? They're moving so slow. They're not doing all the high spots. It's just a different product now, but I think it's much better. I think it's very, very exciting to watch. Um, and the guys are so athletic now with everything that they can do.
Yeah, it's just amazing. Uh, Charles, we could go over what I don't know if you ever counted how many matches you've done just with the WWE, but I'm sure there's real moments that stand out, and two for sure, and another one I'll mention is the Cena, the 16th title.
Right.
So we can start there, and then just the other two is Sean's retirement match,
Yep.
and also with Rick and Rick's retirement match.
Absolutely. Those are definitely three of my
Yeah.
top three favorite. Cena tying Rick's title reign for
Mhm.
one. That was fantastic. I think that was against AJ Styles, right? At the Rumble, if I'm
I
not mistaken. I
yeah,
think.
I think
Um,
so.
yeah, I'd actually torn my plantar fascia in that match. So once that was done, I was out for a couple months
Yeah.
with that. But you know, Cena being the professional that he is, he just stuck his hand out, gave me a handshake, and gave me a big hug, and said that he didn't want anybody else in there for that match but me, because he
Yeah.
knew it would mean so much to me as well.
And what about Sean's retirement match?
I've retired two of the greatest.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. You
retired.
were there.
I mean, I was there. I made the count, so I retired them. Undertaker didn't, and Sean didn't retire Ric Flair.
Yeah.
I made the counts, so I can take credit for retiring those two, I guess. But just for them to put me in that spot, I mean, wow, right?
Yeah.
Um, they had so many other great referees to choose from, and for whatever reason, I was the one that got lucky enough to be chosen.
Yeah.
Because for Rick's match, I know Rick did not go and say, "Hey, I want Charles as my referee." For some reason, the company thought it would be a great idea to put me in the ring for that match.
Yeah, because I know you said everybody wanted that one. That's certainly one
Everybody.
that you want to be a part of. Well, Charles, this has been awesome, and I really, for someone to, as you came into the business, and I kind of put it that way before, where you just wanted to be around it. Could you have ever imagined all the roads you've traveled, probably the planet now, and all the different experiences you've had? How do you sum it all up?
Truly blessed. I'm lucky. It's not necessarily um, great talent. It's being in the right place at the right time. And because I look around and there are so many referees that are so much better than what I do in the ring. That's why I still, to this day, I watch the referees just as much as I watch what's going on in the match, because I can learn something from everyone. So I'm just lucky to be able to do it for as long as I have, and
Yeah.
just to be involved in it, because I love this business. This business is my life. The people I work with, they're family. You know,
Hmm.
and that's the hard part about this business, is when people go somewhere else or they go out of the business and you lose touch with them. You know,
Yeah.
um, that's probably one of the hardest things about this.
Yeah. And you want to keep, and how much longer you think you'll do it? You said 10 years?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I would love to.
Yeah.
I mean, if I can get another 7 to 10 years in the ring, and then hopefully there'll be some sort of job that I can do to help out the younger guys, maybe go to the performance center and help train or something like that, I would, certainly be open to doing that.
Yeah. Well, it's been a hell of a ride, Charles, and I know it's not over yet, but I really want to thank you for coming on Primetime. And how can folks follow you or get in touch, email? How can
Yeah.
they?
It's WWE Robinson, and that's for Twitter and Instagram. And just send me messages. I try to answer everyone, because hey, without the fans, we wouldn't have a business. So I try to communicate. And that's the one good thing about social media that I like, is being able to communicate. If you see me walking through an airport or whatever, please come up and say hello.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be a jerk and blow you off.
Awesome. Well, legendary referee, WWE referee, Charles Robinson, thank you so much for coming on Primetime.
Well, thank you, Mr. Legendary Sean Mooney, because you're a legend yourself, And I appreciate what you do. I love your podcast.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the first part of our conversation with Charles Robinson. Really, just a fascinating guy. I mean, did you know that he was involved in all of that, and that he actually stalked Ric Flair? You're going to be hearing more about that. Can you believe it? And people know him as Little Naitch with WCW. And there's a lot more of the story coming up in part 2, which is going to drop this Friday at 6 a.m. But if you're a Patreon member, of course, you're going to get it early and ad-free. But just a great conversation. I think that folks really enjoyed that part of it, and you're going to enjoy the second part of it just as much as well. And we will be putting up the video version on Patreon as well. You can see his tour that he gives us of his house. You get to see the actual Lil Naitch robe that he has, and really just a great conversation. That'll be coming your way very soon. Follow us on Twitter and also Instagram at Primetime Mooney. Check out our YouTube channel. Keep putting up more stuff, and even MooneyTees.com. We got a new one coming out soon, but there's a great collection on PTSM right now. Just go to MooneyTees.com. I think that's it. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'm Sean Mooney, and I am